Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin and for today's video we are going to be doing another book review, which I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really freaking excited about. So it's been a couple of months since my last book review and I honestly am not sure if I want to make this spoilery or non-spoilery. It will definitely be like non-spoilery at the beginning, but I might want to talk about spoilers in a little bit, so we'll just kind of see. But as per usual, it's taking place on my bed because for whatever reason somewhere down the line I just decided that book reviews are on my bed all the time, always. So okay, so the book that we're going to be talking about today is my most recent read, and that is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. This is a book that I have been wanting to read for a really long time and I picked up on a whim because I found the audiobook on Scribd. This book is about a town in northern Sweden that is really small, super small, and they're obsessed with hockey. Hockey is like the one thing that they have that's basically keeping this town alive, both in spirit and economically. And what happens is one of the star hockey players rapes a girl in this town, and it's just kind of about how the community reacts to this rape, who believes the girl, who doesn't, and even if they do believe her, how they think everything should pan out, and just kind of their reactions to it, the girl's reaction to it, her family's reaction to it, and it's really intense. But this book also just kind of takes a look at what is community and the different facets of that, and it goes beyond the rape and like everything that follows after that. So it looks at friendship between adults, between children, the relationships that children have with their parents and other adults that influence them, and just different things like that, and how even in a small town, how everyone's life can be so vastly different. And it's so like interesting. This is an adult fiction book, and it deals with really heavy topics. So it deals with substance abuse, it deals with abuse, it deals with depression, it deals with rape, obviously, homophobia. There are so many different things. So if like you're worried about that, or you think that there might be material in here that you're sensitive to based on everything else that I just listed, I would definitely recommend, you know, just taking care of yourself and looking more thorough, because I tend to forget trigger warnings, which I like to make pretty clear in any time I'm talking about books. I am really bad about that, so I would recommend looking at more reviews that will kind of discuss that more thoroughly, because like I said, I'm really bad at that. But those are the big ones that I can remember right now. I loved this book. I loved this book because it's very much just like, this is very realistic. Not everything pans out perfectly, and there is literally not a perfect person in this book. Everyone makes a mistake somewhere down the line, or like what might not be the right choice, not necessarily a mistake, but they do things that they regret, etc, etc. And that was another thing that I really appreciated about this book, was there are characters that toward the beginning of the book you're like, that is not an acceptable choice to make, and by the end, not only have they realized it, but they've done something in an effort to redeem themselves. Whether they've redeemed themselves is kind of subjective, up to the reader, but you know, there are characters in here that say things or do things at one point that they're like, oh crap, I definitely shouldn't have done that. And that's another thing that I really appreciated, is this book felt so real. It felt more like nonfiction, not because of the way that it was told, but because these are things that real people do and mistakes that real people make, and I just really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. And talking about it, I feel like I need to talk about spoilers, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. But I would highly recommend this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. If you haven't read it already, definitely do so. There's also a sequel that I'm currently listening to and freaking loving. This one I also had a really unique experience with because I read it along with the audiobook, which is not something that I tend to do. And I loved that experience as well. I cried multiple times, both from sadness, grief, and frustration and anger as well, because people are so irritating, and it's just a really tough book to read sometimes because like you're sitting there going, how can you possibly say that? And then there are also points where you laugh because there is some comic relief, because that is, you know, a way that people cope with certain things and try to distract themselves from the pain that they are actively feeling. And because these people are so well fleshed out, they are basically real people, you know, that happens throughout, and that I think was really cool. And some of like the humor in here is not acceptable, but that's like acknowledged throughout, which again is something that I really like. One more thing before I go into spoilers, I also really liked the narrative style of this. You get multiple points of view, so we kind of see the characters before and after everything. By the end of the book, I felt so connected to them, and I think I'm gonna love the sequel to this even more because I already have a foundation with all of these characters. So that was another thing that I really appreciated, and like I said, there's a sequel and there's a third book coming out next year, which is still a long time away, but you can read it as a standalone or you can, you know, read them as a series, and I'm really excited to continue on with the series. Fredrik Backman is one of my favorite authors of all time. I've read all of his novellas. This was my first full-length novel from him, and I have to read everything because wow, it's just amazing. He also has another book coming out this year called Anxious People. I think it comes out in September, like September 4th or September 8th or something like that, and I'm so excited. So now I'm going to talk about spoilers. So if you haven't read this, or you have no interest in it, or you want to be spoiled because it's a contemporary, so like maybe you don't care about that, then you can keep watching. But if you haven't read this and you want to, I would definitely recommend going and reading it and come back, because this, number one, is an amazing book. Number two, it's an amazing book to experience everything for the first time. So yeah, I'm gonna set it down because my arm is kind of hurting, but some things that I loved about this book. First of all, my favorite characters, definitely Benji, Ramona, and Amit. Even though they're not perfect people, I 100% acknowledge that each of them makes a mistake at some point throughout the book, if not multiple. But from the line where it says like Amit has loved this girl for 7 years, that line completely broke me, and I was like, oh, I love him. He just And when he got in the car with Kevin's dad and was like nodding his head and like wanted to get that job for his mom, I was like, Amit, like that's not okay. But I also like understood, because he wants to take care of his family. He wants his mom to have, you know, doesn't want her to hurt her back or anything. But I loved like how conflicted he was about it, and I loved that he dropped the money, and then because it was just so real, he was like, oh, maybe I should take it so that like it's more money that we have and my mom doesn't have to work as hard for hockey gear and stuff like that. And then when it was out, he was like, this sucks, but also thank goodness, because I would have felt guilty taking it. It's just such a realistic portrayal of humanity, and I loved that. So Amit was one of my favorites. I also freaking loved Ramona, because her standing up for Maya and the Anderson family in general, she's just such a badass. Like, I freaking loved her. I have so many things underlined in here in general, but there are so many things underlined in pink, which for me in annotating is things that I love, where Ramona is telling people off because she's like, you don't get to blame like, number one, your actions, but number two, other people's actions on things or activities, because people do these things. You can't just write it off as, oh, it's hockey's fault. Like, that's not fair to Maya, that's not fair to Kevin, and that's not fair to hockey. So, like, take ownership for your responsibilities. And also, when Kevin's dad came in and was talking to her about removing her sponsorship or whatever, or like sponsoring the head team, I think, and he was like, you know what happened. She was like, no, I don't think you do either. I was like, thank you, please go off on him, please put this man in his place. I loathed Kevin's dad throughout the entire book. I hated him so much. And another really interesting character that I kind of really liked was Kevin's mom, because she was like, well, I know what you did and it's not okay, and how do I support you knowing what you did, but also you're my son and I have an unconditional love for you. Like, that puts me in such a difficult spot. And I loved reading from her perspective because, like, what do you do in that situation? Like, I obviously genuinely don't know, but like, that's such an interesting, and I feel like Fredrik Backman captured it perfectly. And I also loved that literally there was not one single person in this book that was perfect. I also loved Leo. We didn't see very much from him, but I loved his support for her. And Benji. I loved that Benji was able to walk away from his best friend, and toward the end he was like, this is my best friend, like, maybe we can fix this. And then he realized, no, there's nothing to fix. You raped a girl. That's not acceptable. And with me being your friend, I feel like I am condoning this, and that's not something that I'm comfortable with, because again, like, that's such a difficult thing, but being able to walk away and then having that, like, oh, but it's my best friend, no, that doesn't make it okay. Like, I loved that because it just felt so real. And I think that's another thing that made this book really hard to read in a good way, was like, everything felt so real, and like, it just felt so real that it was like, I can't believe these people are saying this. Like, I want to take Maya and put her in a bubble and be like, no, it's fine. And also when she was contemplating like killing herself or Kevin, that was really hard to read. And then I was so nervous that Zacharias was going to take his own life, because I obviously didn't want that. And then he wiped everything off of Maya's locker, and I was like, oh, just, it's so good. It's so good. And then there were bits where I cried, like when David saw Benji and that boy from his sister's bar kissing, and then he felt so much shame because he wasn't better than his dad in the, like, making sure that Benji would feel comfortable telling him that information. That was like, we need to do better than our parents. And I loved that, because I feel like that's something that some people are like, I was raised this way, I'll just accept it, this is okay, and they just continue going on their lives that way. But David was like, I was raised this way and it's not acceptable, and even though I don't do the same things, me enabling it is just as bad, and I need to do better. And I loved that. I cannot say enough good things about this book. I just loved it. So I am done gushing because I don't really have any real thoughts anymore. Otherwise I'll just continue talking about all the characters, and such a long cast of characters that we don't have time for that. But please continue this discussion in the comments below. I would absolutely love to talk to you guys about this book. It is one of my new favorite books of all time. Probably my favorite of the year, if I'm honest. So yeah, let me know if there's anything else that you'd like a review on. My Goodreads is linked down below, so you can kind of see some of the books that I've read this year or in the past in general, whatever. And if you want a review on any of those, let me know and I will make that happen. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I really hope you're doing well, reading mentally and otherwise, and I really hope to see you all in my next video. Bye guys.